The bass from the jukebox thumped a lazy rhythm against the worn wood of O'Malley's pub, a familiar heartbeat in the Friday night haze of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The air was thick with the smell of fried food, spilled beer, and the low hum of after-work decompression. My name is Jack Grizz Kovac. I'm 56 years old. 22 years as an Army Ranger, followed by a not-so-peaceful stint as a private security contractor in places you only see on the news, taught me to read a room before I even opened the door. It's a skill that's kept me breathing. Tonight, the room was reading wrong. For the past hour, 3 college kids have been holding court in a high-backed booth near the back, their laughter a little too sharp, their glances a little too pointed. Their eyes kept skating over my wife, Lena, and me, followed by whispered conferences and smirks. I'd clocked them the moment we walked in. The ringleader, the kid with artfully messy brown hair and a smug, entitled tilt to his chin, wore a Carnegie Mellon sweatshirt like a letter of marque. His 2 lieutenants, one a thick-necked jock in a varsity jacket, the other a wiry kid with shifty eyes and a predatory grin, egged him on. Lena's hand found mine under the scarred tabletop, her fingers lacing through mine with a gentle, knowing pressure. She's 51, but with a vibrancy that fools everyone. Tonight she was radiant. She wore an emerald green dress that made her eyes look like deep forest pools, and her silver-streaked dark hair was piled elegantly on her head, catching the dim golden light of the pub's lamps. After 28 years of marriage, she could still make my breath catch in my throat. "Ready to go, my love?" I asked, keeping my voice low and even, a calm lake over a deep, turbulent current. She nodded, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She had seen me tense up, had felt the subtle shift in my posture from relaxed husband to assessing protector. It's a beautiful night for a walk. We stood, and as we passed their booth, the dynamic shifted. The ringleader, whose name I'd overheard as Chad, unfolded himself from his seat, blocking our path to the heavy oak door. His 2 friends flanked him instantly, a practiced maneuver. "Hey, hold up a second," Chad said, his voice carrying over the music, loud enough to draw the attention of the patrons at the surrounding tables. He gave Lena a slow, appraising look that made my jaw tighten. Lena's hand tightened on my arm. In my peripheral vision, I saw Mick, the grizzled old bartender who'd owned O'Malley since the 70s, pause in his glass wiping. His eyes met mine, and he gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. It wasn't a warning for me. It was an apology for what his bar was about to host. "Probably his nurse," Brett snorted. "Gotta change his diapers, right?"
"Come on, sweetheart," the wiry one, Dylan, added, his voice a nasal whine. "Stick with us. We'll show you what a real Friday night looks like. Bet Grandpa here is already past his bedtime." I looked at them. Really looked at them. Soft hands that had never known real calluses. Expensive, pre-distressed jeans. The casual arrogance of youth that had never been truly tested, never been broken down and rebuilt in a crucible of discipline and pain. They'd seen too many movies, played too many video games, and mistaken their privilege for potency. "Sure, fellas," I said, my voice dropping into the calm, measured tone I used with new recruits who thought their basic training made them invincible. It was patient. It was final. "You have a good night." Chad mistook my control for fear. His chest puffed out. "What's that supposed to mean, old man?" "Not a thing," I said, guiding Lena gently around them. "We're just leaving." But as we pushed through the door into the cool Pittsburgh night, I felt them behind us. The energy had curdled. The night wasn't over. 20 years ago, I would have ended it inside the bar. Back when I was Master Sergeant Kovac teaching close-quarters battle to Rangers at Fort Benning, disrespect was met with immediate and decisive correction. But Lena had sanded my rough edges smooth. She taught me that true strength isn't about dominating every fool who crosses your path. It's about choosing your battles to protect what truly matters. I met her in 1997, a year after my second tour. She was a physical therapist at the VA, working with guys whose bodies and souls were shattered. The first time I saw her, she was patiently helping a kid my age, A triple amputee learned to use his new prosthetic arm. She was talking to him like he was whole, like he had a future. That's when I knew. We married a year later. We wanted a family, but it wasn't in the cards for us. So we built our world around each other. She was my anchor when I transitioned to a civilian life that felt alien and soft. I supported her when she went back to school, first for her doctorate, then to open her own practice. Now she ran the largest physical rehabilitation center in the state. Tonight was our anniversary, 28 years. We'd chosen O'Malley's for dinner because it's where we'd had our first date. Same sticky floors, same smell of stale hops, same Mick behind the bar, though his hair was whiter and his back more stooped. But those boys had been a dark cloud over our evening. I'd noticed them when we walked in. The way their conversation hitched when Lena shrugged off her coat, the way their eyes tracked her across the room. I knew that look. I'd seen it in the eyes of warlords and gangsters, a possessive, hungry glare that saw people as things to be acquired. Lena had noticed too, but she was used to attention. She possessed a timeless beauty that turned heads everywhere we went. I usually took it as a point of pride. Tonight it felt like a threat. "They're just kids, Jack," she had whispered, placing her hand over mine. "Ignore them." But as we shared a slice of chocolate torte, I caught the drift of their conversation. Wasted on that geezer. Probably bought her with his retirement fund. Bet she's starved for a real man. The kind of vile, entitled talk that comes from never being punched in the mouth for it. Chad had gotten up to go to the men's room and made a point of slowing down at our table. He had leaned in, his breath smelling of cheap whiskey, and winked at Lena. "Save me a dance later, gorgeous." Lena had flinched, her smile vanishing for the first time all night. That was the moment I decided we were leaving. Not because I was afraid of 3 drunk college students, but because my wife's peace, her joy on our anniversary was more valuable than any lesson I could teach them.
I should have known they wouldn't let it go. The parking lot behind O'Malley's was a patch of cracked asphalt lit by 2 flickering sodium lights that cast long, distorted shadows. Lena and I were halfway to my old Ford Bronco when I heard the pub door swing open and the scuff of shoes on gravel. "Hey, we're not done talking!" Chad's voice sliced through the quiet. I stopped walking. Lena's hand found mine, her grip firm and familiar. In 28 years together, she'd seen me in action exactly 4 times. Each time it was over so fast it seemed like a trick of the light. "Jack," she said softly, a note of pleading in her voice, "let's just go home." I turned. All 3 of them stood there, silhouetted against the light from the bar's windows. Chad had his phone out, already recording, anticipating his viral moment of triumph. "See, the problem is," Brett the jock said, cracking his knuckles, "we don't think the lady wants to go home with you." "Yeah," Dylan sneered, moving to block our path to the Bronco. "We think she wants a real celebration, not whatever sad little party you've got planned." That was when the switch flipped. It wasn't a surge of anger, it was a cold, calm settling of my soul into a well-worn groove. The civilian Jack Kovac receded, and the Ranger emerged. Lena caught the change in my posture and the way the air around me seemed to grow still and heavy. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said, never taking my eyes off the 3 of them. "These gentlemen just want to have a conversation. Let's give them our full attention." I slowly, deliberately shrugged off my leather jacket, folded it with practiced precision, and handed it to Lena. The movement was ritualistic, a pre-fight drill I'd done 1,000 times. "All right, boys," I said, rolling up my sleeves. "You followed us out here. You clearly want to impress someone, so let's see what you've got. But we do this like gentlemen, one at a time." They stared at me, then at each other and burst into incredulous laughter. "Are you serious?" Chad choked out, pocketing his phone and adopting a sloppy boxing stance. "You want to fight all 3 of us, one at a time?" Unless you're scared, I said, my voice flat. Numbers are the only advantage you have. Let's see if any one of you can back up that big talk. Their laughter died. Pride, the eternal weakness of young men, had been pricked. Lena took a few steps back toward the Bronco, holding my jacket to her chest. She knew exactly what was coming, even if they didn't. During my time, I didn't just teach Rangers how to shoot, I taught them how to fight, how to read an opponent's center of gravity, the telegraphing of movement in the shoulders and hips, the intention in their eyes. These boys were an open book and every page was blank. Chad came at me first, just as I knew he would. All ego, no skill. "This is for embarrassing me in there, old Nan," he yelled, telegraphing a wild, looping right haymaker from a mile away. I watched it come in what felt like slow motion. His weight shifted to his back foot, his shoulder dropped, his entire body coiling into the punch with everything he had. In my world, we called it target lock. Your brain processes the threat so fast, everything else seems to slow to a crawl. I didn't block. I didn't retreat. I simply took a small, precise step to my left. His fist whistled past my ear, carrying all his momentum with it. With nothing to stop its arc, his own force threw him forward, off balance and stumbling. I didn't need to push him. I just extended my foot slightly.
Chad's legs tangled with mine, and he sailed face first into the solid brick wall of O'Malley's with a sickening, wet thud. He slid down the wall into a groaning heap, clutching his face. "My nose! I think you broke my nose!" "You broke your own nose," I said, calmly. "I just got out of the way. Poor spatial awareness. You should work on that." "Chad!" Brett yelled, his face contorted with rage. He charged, but unlike Chad, he didn't swing. He dropped his shoulder, aiming to tackle me around the waist. High school football tactics against a man who disarmed trained killers. I waited until the last possible second, then grabbed his outstretched arms. Instead of resisting his charge, I pivoted, using his own considerable momentum to redirect him. It was a basic Aikido principle, unbalancing the opponent by using their own energy against them. Brett grunted in surprise as his trajectory changed violently. He couldn't stop himself. He plowed sideways at speed into a large, rusted dumpster. The impact was spectacular, a deafening gong that echoed through the parking lot. But his momentum wasn't spent. The dumpster's lid was open, Brett hit it at waist height, and his legs flipped up and over, catapulting him headfirst into a pile of reeking garbage bags with a squelching thud. "I'm stuck! Get me out!" His voice was muffled and panicked from inside the metal bin. His legs, clad in expensive jeans, kicked feebly at the air. I peered over the edge. 22 years Army Rangers taught me patience, son. It also taught me physics. They're a bitch. The third kid, Dylan, was backing away, his eyes wide with dawning horror. He looked from Chad, who was moaning and bleeding against the wall, to Brett, who was trapped and flailing in the dumpster, to me, standing there without a hair out of place. Lena walked over and handed me my jacket, her eyes shining with a complex mix of worry, pride, and love. She was seeing the man I used to be, the man I still was underneath the gray hair and the civilian clothes. "Are you all right, my love?" I asked, slipping the jacket on. "Never better," she said, her voice steady, as she linked her arm through mine. That's when Chad tried to play his last card. "He attacked us," he whined to the growing crowd, blood bubbling from his nose. "This crazy old man attacked us for no reason." Mick stepped forward, his voice a low growl. "Son, I watched the whole thing through the window. You three followed them out here. You started it. This man here never threw a punch. He just stood there while you idiots tried to fight a wall, a dumpster, and a parking sign." "Yeah, he's right," a woman called out, holding up her phone. "I got it all. You guys did this to yourselves." The wail of sirens cut through the night. 2 police cruisers and an ambulance pulled into the lot, lights painting the scene in flashes of blue and red. As the EMTs descended on the 3 boys, the reality of their situation began to dawn. I gave my statement to Officer Miller, a no-nonsense woman I knew from the Veterans Outreach program I volunteered with. She took my account with a neutral expression, occasionally glancing at the phone videos the witnesses provided.
"Let me get this straight," she said, reviewing her notes. "They followed you, made threats, and then, individually, injured themselves attempting to assault you while you used defensive positioning?" "That's correct, officer," I said. "Basic principles of leverage and momentum from my Army service." 22 years, Rangers, she confirmed, writing it down. "Retired Master Sergeant." Over by the ambulance, the boys were being patched up. Chad's nose was definitely broken. Brett was finally extracted from the dumpster, covered in unspeakable filth, reeking of failure. Dylan was coming around, groggy and confused, with a concussion and a goose egg on his head. Their stories, given to Officer Miller's partner, were hysterical and contradictory, completely at odds with the multiple videos. Their bluster had evaporated, replaced by a dawning, pathetic fear. They weren't just physically hurt, they were publicly, undeniably humiliated. We were free to go. As we drove away in the Bronco, I saw them in the rearview mirror. 3 young men whose lives had just irrevocably changed, learning the hardest lesson of their lives in a dirty parking lot behind a pub. The consequences, as we soon learned, were just beginning. 2 weeks later, Lena found it on her laptop. "Jack, you need to see this." The video, compiled from 3 different phone recordings, had been edited with dramatic music, slow-motion replays, and snarky captions. It was titled, "Pittsburgh Porch Pirates. 3 college tools get schooled by Ranger Grandpa. No punches thrown." It had gone viral, millions of views. It was on every social media platform, every local news site. The comments were merciless. "The dumpster dive had me crying. Oscar-worthy performance. Imagine getting your ass kicked by the laws of physics. That man is my hero, calm, collected, and utterly devastating. FAFO the musical." Their identities were quickly doxed. Chad Williamson, a senior business major from a wealthy family already on academic probation for cheating. Brett Holloway, a scholarship football player with aspirations of going pro. Dylan Phelps, a computer science whiz kid with a history of creepy DMs to female classmates. The university launched an immediate investigation. Chad and Brett were suspended from their fraternity, which then issued a public statement condemning their reprehensible behavior. Dylan was dropped from a prestigious internship program. The video became a cultural touchstone. It was used in self-defense classes to demonstrate de-escalation and nonviolent resolution. It was shown in university orientation programs as a cautionary tale about harassment and alcohol. Memes of Brett's legs sticking out of the dumpster were everywhere. 6 months later, Lena did some digging through her professional network. "You remember our friends from O'Malley's?" she asked over breakfast. "Vaguely," I said, sipping my coffee. Chad Williamson's father, the big-shot investor, was apparently mortified. The video cost him a major business deal when it was dug up by a competitor during due diligence. Chad was cut off financially and forced to transfer to a no-name school out west. Brett Holloway, she continued, lost his football scholarship. The coaches said he was a distraction. The facial scarring from the brick wall didn't help his prospects. Last anyone heard, he was working construction for his uncle. "And Dylan?" I asked. "Dylan had the worst of it, in a way. The concussion was more serious than they thought. He had to withdraw from school for the semester. The combination of the head injury and the public shaming apparently triggered a severe depressive episode. He's living at home, getting treatment. The knife didn't help his case. He caught a misdemeanor weapons charge." I listened, finishing my coffee. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a cold, quiet sense of justice. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly, "not stopping it before it started?"
I thought about it, watching the morning sun light up her face. "No," I said finally. "They made a choice. They targeted what they thought was weakness. I just held up a mirror. They didn't like what they saw. The world gave them the consequences they'd been avoiding their entire lives." We returned to O'Malley's on our next anniversary. Mick greeted us like royalty.
"The Kovac corner booth is ready for you," he announced with a flourish. He'd even put a small, discreet plaque on the wall next to it. "Respect isn't given, it's earned." As we sat down, I looked around the familiar pub. It felt peaceful, settled. The three boys had sought to humiliate us, to assert their dominance. Instead, they'd become a permanent internet joke, their failure etched into the digital record forever. They'd learned that the world doesn't care about your ego, that real strength is silent, and that some lessons are delivered not with fists, but with the inexorable, unforgiving force of consequence. Lena raised her glass of wine. "To a quiet night." I clinked my glass against hers. "To quiet nights," I agreed. And as I looked at my wife, safe, happy, and proud, I knew that sometimes the most satisfying revenge is simply walking away unscathed, while your enemies are destroyed by their own foolishness.